Hola, buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you for coming to this workshop devoted to technology applied to culture. And we're going to see different projects developed as culture projects in Spain. We've got also international examples and projects that can be an example of good practices to be shared with other interested parties to replicate these projects, or that might be interesting to create new innovative projects. We have 4 representatives. I'm going to make a brief introduction of each one of them before they present their project. Each one will make a brief presentation, and then, if possible, we want to leave some time for debate. So if the audience has a question, well, that you have the opportunity to raise it. To address questions that you might have before the presentations or during the presentations. So without further ado, María del Mar Fernández, who works at the Vodafone Foundation in Spain. She's a biologist of training, and she has done a master's on foundations management. She has been working for many years in different projects for the elderly and disabled people, amongst them the Yo Voy al Teatro, Bibliotecas Accesibles, and a project which is really important that has covered more than 130,000 elderly people, where they have trained them on mobile cell phones. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank ONCE Foundation for inviting Vodafone and myself to talk at this workshop, and thank you all for being here to share this workshop with us. In order to start my presentation, I'd like to explain what Vodafone Spain Foundation is. We bring IT and ICT close to vulnerable groups. We understand as vulnerable groups the elderly people and disabled people, because we do believe firmly and we are convinced that technologies help people to have a better life with a better quality. It fosters autonomy, makes people more independent and more self-assured. And when people manage technologies, they are part of the information society. And if we've got disabled people handling those technologies, we will allow them to find a job, and then we favor job and employment. So there are many, many barriers for disabled people. We all know it. And not only physical barriers that, due to architectural solutions, can disappear, but there are also other kinds of barriers that are much more invisible, which in today's society does not allow these people to access to information, does not allow them to communicate, and that's what people with visual impairment or audio impairment suffer from. And with this context, and knowing that ICTs are so powerful, from the Vodafone Foundation, we have tried to eliminate these kind of barriers, giving access to information and to communication. We believe that disabled people are and have a legitimate right to lead the most normal life possible. They must have access to leisure, to culture, to training. And of course, once they're trained, they must find a job. That's why our beneficiaries are elderly people and people with disabilities. I shall now focus on disabled people with auditive and visual impairment, because we do believe that in order to be able to enjoy for an accessible cultural leisure, technology is fundamental. So let me introduce you 3 apps we have developed from Vodafone Foundation or with other collaborators and agents. We never like to talk about sponsorship, because since the beginning we get involved either with the association or with the user. since the beginning. We believe that the user's needs, that's what the origin of technological solutions. So 3 apps: Odes Mobile, Teatro Accesible, accessible theater, and Teatro Real Accesible, accessible real theater. They are all 3 free of charge apps, and no matter what system you have in your device, you can download these in Android, iOS, etc. So if we start with the first one, which is Odes Mobile, the icon, you see it in the screen. I wouldn't mind if during my presentation you download this app so that you can see the possibilities of this app, because I guess that most of the room here, most of the audience will have a smartphone, Android or iPhone, so that they can download this app. And we all know what audio description is. Audio description is the possibility that people with a visual impairment have to receive extra information before certain visual productions. So, if we can have that audio description downloaded in a mobile device, we won't need to have someone explaining another one what is going on with certain gestures, robes, the scene in a film or a TV series. So if we do have this app and we can download this audio description, we'll get back to one of the ideas I said before. It provides you independence. You won't need someone telling you that information. So this is a free of charge app. The first milestone is that it is already set in the device, and apart from being in the device, it synchronizes automatically. I go to the movies, I'm 10 minutes late, I download the app of that film, and it connects just at that moment in time of the film, so synchronization is immediate. This app has been done in collaboration with S2. And we have got 426 productions, out of which 314 are films. We've got 8 short films and 3 series. I'd like to highlight here the collaboration we had with Antena 3 and their foundation, because they audio described Velvet, the series, and then we've got also 7 documentaries. There is also an institutional video that tomorrow, if you come to the Discapnet Awards, you will be able to download, and you will see how it's audio described. So tomorrow, if you come here, you will get a paper indicating how to download it, and you will be able to see firsthand how this app of Odes Mobile is. So if we continue, we see that visually impaired people can access movies or certain series or documentaries. Then our next step was to take audio description and any kind of accessibility to the theater. The next app I'm going to introduce is the Teatro Accesible app. You've got the icon and you can download it. It's for free so that you can see how the app works. You can consult here theater works. For people who like theater, having an ongoing programming of the plays is very interesting. And this app is going to provide information on the kind of disability and how it's solved for its accessibility. For example, someone who's visually impaired will be able to know if that play is audio described or if the program is in Braille, or if it's someone who's got an audio impaired will be able to know if there's sign translation, or if there are subtitles, or if there are magnetic loops for people with implants. They explain the kind of play, the timetable, and where the theater is located. For us, this is a very important app. We have developed it with UPTEN and the Association Psiquiatría y Vida because it creates employment. We're really concerned about disabled people to be trained and get a job. So At the Carlos III University, there's a master's degree on a specialist on audio description and subtitling. So disabled people can follow these studies and become experts in audio description and subtitling. So that is also a broth and a breed for employment. We have also developed a website complementing the app, which is www.teatroaccesible.com, in which you can get all kinds of information on the programs of theaters. We have got accessible theaters with this audio description and subtitling. In Madrid, we've got a few, the CDN, in Valencia, in Seville. We've had it in Malaga and in Barcelona. So there is quite a major supply so that disabled people can enjoy from going to the theater. In order to finish, I'd like to explain the Teatro Real Accesible app. We have provided the possibility to disabled people to go to the movies or enjoy television. And then the next step was for these people to go to the theater. So the idea was, why not enjoying opera? So in collaboration with the Teatro Real Foundation, the Royal Theatre Foundation, and with Vodafone Foundation, we have set up this app. The developer has been S2. They have helped us with the user test to validate and to continue collaborating in the project. ONCE, FIAPAS, the National Confederation of Deaf People of Spain, and CESIA. And they have tested, users have tested this app, and this app, you can download it in your cell phone. There's an audio description and overtitles. When they get to the Royal Theatre, this app is downloaded, and it connects automatically with the opera. But I think that you must see firsthand and feel how a user goes to the opera. So I'm going to show you a video so that you realize what it is for a visually impaired person to go to the opera.
No. Ay, espera. Espera, ya. Ay, se ha ido, espera. No, está bien. No, si tiene que ser la pantalla entera. No, espera. Ya lo pongo, espera. A ver, aquí. Ay.
Alberto, porque hoy va a ir al Teatro Real.
Alberto is going to the Royal Theatre. Thanks to the Teatro Real Accesible app, he is going to enjoy from the show as never before. The app is very simple to download and use. Once downloaded, you look for the play, and through the QR in the theater, you will get the audio description and overtitles. With some headsets, you can hear the description that helps blind people to follow the works. With the app, Alberto can listen the program of the show before it starts. Thanks to the audio description, Alberto follows the play from his chair and listens to the description of what is going on in the scene. A youngster and crown to the left are getting ready to box. The graffitis are being drawn. Clara is at the balcony of the second floor with a baby. Boxers start to fight. You can also follow in the screens the overtitles if you cannot just follow the screens of the theater. For me, being able to come to the opera thanks to this app designed by Vodafone Foundation and together with the Royal Theatre has been a fantastic experience. To me, until now, opera was simply just listening to the music and with information that I had brought previously. But with the app, I can be at the same level of conditions as any spectator. And that's what when we think about inclusion and to have better accessibility and accessing culture. And I encourage all the people to come to the opera, and that they come with an open mind, so that is for all.
Bueno, pues como habéis podido...
Well, as you have been able to see, well, people, when they access this leisure activity, that culture, and leading a normalized life, as you've seen from the contributions of these visually impaired person, are excellent. Though I've been explaining it during the presentation, I'd like to first of all thank all the collaborators that have participated in the 3 apps I have presented: ONCE, CIDAD, CESIA, the Royal Patronage of Disabilities, the Royal Theatre, Tenis y Categoría, FIAPAS, Aristia, CNS, and CIDOS. And they have been great colleagues for a journey, and that have allowed for Vodafone Foundation to continue to be committed to disabled people and work for new technologies to be accessible, because sooner or later we will all need these to be able to lead a normal life. And finally, thank you all, and I will leave you the information of Vodafone Foundation and in the Facebook, the website, and Twitter. Thank you for your attention.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias, Mar.
Thank you, Mar. While Maria Jesus Rubio gets ready, I'd like to use this opportunity to say that the moderator in the program, Jesus Garcia Calero from the ABC Culture section, he has apologized. He called this morning. He was feeling sick. He could not even talk. And he has tried to come, but in the end, he has had to cancel his presence today. But anyways, thank you for having your collaboration, Jesus, wherever you are. And we hope you get well soon. Well, now Maria Jesus Rubio, curator of museums, working at the Archaeological National Museum and at the Dissemination Department. You know that this museum reopened a year and a half ago, and they have reopened, but in a quite original way, integrating a lot of elements of accessibility in the museum. As a professional, Maria Jesus has got a PhD, has a degree on geography and history, and from her CV, since 2005, she is one of the curators of the Ministry of Culture. And since 2006, she's part of the Dissemination Department of the National Archaeological Museum in the section of training programs. You have the floor. Well, thank you, above all, for allowing me to participate at this meeting. And I'll say that I'm going to present in a general terms what the accessibility plan that the National Archaeological Museum has set up since its reopening last year. The subtitle defines the objective that we are looking for the museum to be a meeting point for everyone. And we will see how has this been organized. It is important to see how the project was created, how it's evolved since its first ideas of this accessibility plan, because it was first conceived since the beginning of the remodeling works of the museum in 2008. And in principle, it was covering accessibility for disabled people, but from the physical impairment, motor impairment, audiovisual, and hearing impairment. But as we evolved in the project, we decided to commit towards universal accessibility, covering any need with any impairment. We will see how many of the elements of this accessibility, technologically wise or physically or materially wise, are thought for any visitor coming to the museum, not only for disabled, specifically disabled or impaired people. Well, the reasons behind this, because we wanted to provide the opportunity to participate and enjoy the experience of visiting a museum to anyone, any person, because accessibility was not only functional accessibility, but also we were talking about communication accessibility. I mean, to have equal grounds access to the information included in the museum. We wanted to meet and abide by the legislation that we have to follow as a public service. And also we wanted to try and reach excellency and excel in those ideas that we're still developing. The main addressees are people with motor, visual and hearing impairments, but always take into account the rest of visitors and their needs, physical but also intellectual needs. For people with motor impairments, we did adequate signaling so that they would identify and access the museum spaces, and we've eliminated architectural barriers by setting up ramps, elevators, free access doors, and in many spaces that give access to the exhibition halls, to the lockers, conference rooms, toilets, and for people in wheelchairs especially. For the audio impaired people, we've subtitled all the audiovisuals of the permanent show exhibition. It's true that this new museum is using new technologies for audiovisuals or for interactive elements that are accessible for people with hearing impairments. We've got magnetic loops and fixed magnetizers in specific areas of the museum, such as in the lockers, information desk, and the multimedia guide that we will talk about at different moments. This is a multimedia guide in Spanish, English, and French, which has been developed in collaboration with EDAM as a major device. It can be also downloaded, and it includes 300 locutions, 300 texts on different pieces of the museum, and different thematic parcours on archaeology of the death, the 33 best pieces that each one of the users can select and use as they want. This multimedia includes, in the case for audio impaired people, it includes subtitling of the texts and videos in sign languages of those texts. I will take more time to explain accessibility for visually impaired people, which is the side that has been more developed. We have to say that this plan has been a project of collaboration, because such a project cannot be done on our own. We've had the dissemination department. We've collaborated with the company in charge to conceive and develop the furniture. We've also counted on the collaboration of companies that have done reproductions of objects that are part of tactile stations, and we've had the constant support and advice of ONCE, who has helped us since the beginning. We've did the first assessment when we started the project, and we are going to continue in the assessment processes of the results that have been achieved and that I will explain later on with greater detail. The objectives, of course, were twofold: to provide the opportunity to people with visual disabilities to access information and the experience of the museum, reason for which the elements included in the exhibition are in the exhibition as such. They're not separate spaces. We wanted to provide the opportunity for them to feel that experience and to hear the rest of people in the rooms, to hear if there's a lot of people, few people, there are kids. So a much more direct experience in the room and with regards to the content of the room in the show. So they participate directly in the exhibition. But we were also looking for a better understanding objective for people that have no visual impairment. I mean, the pieces and the objects in the stations can be touched by everyone. We will see some examples. So what kind of strategies do we use? Basically two. On the one side, general signs with a general directory with variety macro characters, with all the services shown and all the interesting elements for visitors. And other plans or maps or lists of all the plants with on all the floors with the main information. And then the tactile stations, 17, and they are small exhibitions themselves. This is an example of one of these stations. They're all through the permanent exhibition, and they have got a title, which is the macro idea, the general idea to be developed, with a text explaining to the left, and then there are groups of objects. Each group of object has a subtitle explaining the content of that group of objects, and at the same time, each object is explained in a different text. It's all in Braille and macro font. The contents are in relation to the content as such of the exhibition. They develop similar ideas so that you can follow the content that the permanent exhibition has been developing. It was important in this sense to select the objects to be reproduced because they had to be significant for the ideas we were trying to convey in each station. And they were not only reproductions, but also reliefs, maps, mock-ups. And in that sense, these were very important to be able to clarify technical processes that otherwise it would have been very difficult to visualize or to explain or make know if it's not through the touch. With regards to the objects reproduced, we have looked for the greatest fidelity. I mean, we wanted for them to be built with similar materials to the originals. In the ceramics have been done by a pottery company. The objects, stone objects of archaeology, have been done by an expert on experimental archaeology. I mean, they had to have the color, the touch, and the texture as similar as possible to the original, because if you're touching something that has to be gold and you touch it and it's hot or warm, well, the feeling is not what you were expecting, and we want you to touch something similar to the reality. In this case, we use the multimedia guide, which includes audio descriptions of each one of these stations, and we did a short previous assessment with the people from the ONCE to test how these audio descriptions worked. Right now, we continue to develop all this plan that I'm very briefly explaining. By developing each one of these aspects of the three I've explained, we are also starting minor works that will continue in time to put in place mechanisms for intellectually impaired people of easy reading, orientation in the space, etc., etc. And what's even more important, right now we're starting a process of assessment. I mean, if we do not carry out the assessment of how all these that we have set up is working, we will not be able to know if it works well or not, and we won't know what are the things to be corrected, to improve, to change. We do know that in the audio description there are things that we have to improve, of course, because from the information that we get, they're not working as we were expecting, but we're going to assess systematically and scientifically all these to validate the results of this accessibility plan. Obviously, the new museum has changed a lot. In its approach, but it has also changed and with regards to technologies, because the audiovisuals, the interactive elements are many, and they help to understand the thread of argumentation of the exhibition. And the multimedia guide is being a major help for people with some disabilities, such as visual impairment or cognitive impairment. But it's also very useful for people that are not disabled, but that they can choose and select the kind of visit they want to pay to the visit through the multimedia guide. I've got some images. So these reliefs, how they are used, and some of the groups of objects. These to your left, you see that there's a bronze vase, ceramics, glass, and each one is made with its materials, except for metal. Bronze is very difficult to reproduce, but we have done it with materials that had a metallic inclusions, so the touch and the look and feel is as similar as possible to the originals. I'd like to finish simply by saying that we are just following a line that was already started by many other museums, not only that museums that depend on the Ministry of Education, Culture and Sports, but by many other museums in Spain and abroad. But above all, we have to highlight that what museums want basically now is to foster the social role that museums have as a meeting point for everyone, and for everyone has to cover every person, no matter what his or her capacities are. Another change in the mindset is thinking about people with different capacities, because people are different, and therefore offering our museums with total universal accessibility for all kinds of visitors. Thank you very much.
Bueno, pues ahora, tal como está dispuesta la mesa.
Well, the way we had organized our table, we're now going to ask you to switch seats, please. And while you get ready, I would just like to mention that we're currently witnessing a transformation of the concept of access to culture. 15 years ago, we could have defined this as access in just physical terms, but now we can see a general change that is being integrated, and we now see the inclusion of sensory aspects, and now visual and hearing impairment is equally included. Now our next speaker is opening his presentation. Well, before he starts, I would just like to share a piece of information with you. In 2008, there was an age survey carried out that included people with disabilities, and almost 18% of people with a disability felt discriminated in their participation in cultural leisure activities. And quite often, in terms of social participation, this rate got up to 25%. Since 2008, many projects have been developed in terms of culture and leisure. Because people who said that they felt discriminated were people with a sensory disability, and there has been a lot of improvement. We can see how different aspects in different environments have significantly improved, and now what we're going to see is a product that represents that improvement in access to culture. It's going to be presented by our next speaker, called Eric Turner. He is a lawyer and he's member of Carpe Vitam Council. He likes to be defined as a sensory man because he's developed activities to improve accessibility to heritage through the use of sensory access related technologies. He developed a project that he considers makes the Wall of Berlin talk so that it can share its history. And another project that he undertook was to turn a museum into, I said museum, but I meant airport, an airport that tells the previous story of this airport and the way it was built. In terms of technology use, he has touched upon different methods, NFC, and he also took a step back to go to QR because it was a more widespread technology, and now he's testing low-cost Bluetooth technologies. So now you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Okay, here we go. To continue, is this button here?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So thanks once again for being here. And also thank you very much for the Vodafone Foundation, because due to the Vodafone Foundation, I was actually only being able to do all this programming and financing the projects. That was with Mindtext, and as was mentioned already, we started off with NFC technology due to the aspect that you only need to touch the sensor, and then you would obtain the information, and we made it automatically talk to you. Going back to QR codes, a rather visual based information, close being able to say, you're blind, fair enough, make the photos for this party, was not such a good idea, I thought, in the beginning. But then the German National Board of Blind and Disabled, Blind and Visually Impaired People, ABSV and DBSV, decided give it a try because we want to use it. And so we implemented it there in their offices and first made a pinball, so a little pinboard, being able to display the information there. Now we did various museums, and now I decided to do something, and it all was born due to personal reasons, because I was a very short-sighted, 1% vision, and when it comes to certain things in my life, I'm rather autistic. That means I place my glasses always at the same position, my magnifying glasses have their position, my wallet has its position, and if my son is cleaning up, I'm lost. And so I think that a lot of people share that expression or impression, and so therefore I decided to build something based on Bluetooth Low Energy, and this is what I'm going to introduce now here. It's called Busca. It's a free of charge app, made currently for the iPhone, but hopefully will be soon available also for the Android system. It all started off with the aspect that I hated not being autonomously on an airport, and having to wait till the last suitcase makes its round, so I know, oh, this must be mine. And then actually having the experience being at the European Commission and the European Parliament, when officers of barrier freedom and equal chances came up to me and said, could you help us, because our interpreters and blind translators, they always have to change interpretation cabins for different locations, and when they have to go to the toilet, they don't come back if they find a toilet. And so we said, okay, toilet is a problem, my suitcase is a problem, and we have keys, as you can see, and this the wallet, and so forth. And then all of a sudden, one of our programmers came along and said, like, I tested the beacon on the suitcase and it worked. And I was like, well, how did it work? And so he's like, well, I just measured the strength of the signal. And it's like, yeah, and so what? And it's like, yeah, but I connected it to the meters. I was like, oh, well, then it's getting interesting. And so now we used beacons and giving it a, hold on, yeah, giving it a try. And that was basically what would be the ideal situation. I'm going out at a location where this information is placed, and I'm not, and maybe some of you might not know, but blind people or people with deaf problems is a business as well. and people try to sell things. When completely blind people travel, they wear hand luggage which weighs around 20 kilos at least. We're talking about the braille aspect of having to be attached to the computer. You need some headphones. You need your stick, but that's not finishing it. We need the ultra-wide sensories, so you don't hit your head because you only have the barrier freedom on your feet and stuff like that. So some things are really necessary, but a lot of things, and that's exactly what Vodafone is awarding various times, is necessary to be dealt and focused with the smartphone. And the phone is not just there to give it a phone. I mean, I think the technology which is in our smartphones nowadays, I think they had less technology flying on the moon in the 70s. So, so therefore, we should use the technologies and we should use the sensories. And so here we see it. Maybe you know it, and I don't know whether you have that game in Spain as well or in Europe. But when little children have their birthday party, they get blindfolded. And they get a little hammer. Well, in Germany it's a hammer. I mean, you might use a little stick. But and then they hit the ground, and then you say cold, warm, and that's basically the system how that works. I mean, you just move in one direction, and it says, and the distance gets stronger, longer, and so therefore you're wrong. And so you must change the direction, and then you end up in probably hitting, hopefully, your keys, your wallet, or whatever you're looking for. In that case, you need the toilet. Then we tested a few of those beacon. It's a rather new technology. I mean, I wouldn't say super new, but I mean, it starts slowly but surely establishing in museums. We implemented it in the Pergamon Museum. Some of you might know it. It's a rather famous museum in Berlin. I'm in the Museum Island. It's getting renovated, so nobody can see what we did there. So it's wonderful. No, but might be something which is going to be very hopefully in the next 3 years being implemented completely, and you can do navigation with it, and more than what we use it now, just measuring the strength of the signal. Here we see some rough test ideas which we figured out. There is the gimbal beacon, which is rather small. I have it in my pocket actually. It's like that size, so that's really super small. But it shows also the problem. I mean, of course, not just electricity mobility when it comes to battery cars and stuff like that have the problem with the batteries and the weight of the batteries. But here the size is the reason why this beacon only lasts for around 2 to 3 months. But it lasts for my journey. So whenever I go now, for example, here I have those beacon attached to the key, and at my door, and I put it, placed it at the top of the door where I'm stationed in PO 12. So whoever wants to find me just has to follow the beacon, and then you're at my door. The best thing is the size. The rest is okay. Then we have the Beacon IO, and this one is a pure, wonderful average beacon, which allows you to change the battery as well and give it a USB chargeable aspect. And then last but not least, we have a completely closed system with the battery lasting for 5 years. So it's once the battery ran out or you're out of charge, throw it away, because after 5 years, and that technology, you don't want to use it again. Last but not least, we have, what is this? Oh yeah, here we illustrate how we're programming it. You have some. I'm only a lawyer, so and this is not my business, but I give you enough time to read it. Major, minor, and it's apparently rather easy, and it can be implemented rather easy as well. Which we did also for now Mindtext, the application we are using for NFC and QR for Android as well as iOS. To conclude, there are various aspects which speak for the usage of sensory devices or sensors in general. it stressed yesterday me extremely. I wouldn't say it stressed. I mean, it was astonishing. It was astonishing that we've seen in Madrid a museum which I loved, but I loved because it was just my kind of light I love. Hardly any light, but very well done. But I couldn't use the audio guide because I just touched everything, but it did work somehow, but not when I wanted it to work. And so I gave it away, and I was very happy to be guided. When the person in charge told me, what do you think of our museum? It's only 2 years of age. I was like, my God, where are the sensors? Where is NFC? Where is QR? Where is at least a little bit of something to touch? Well, we have 2 things to touch. Great. So I was a bit astonished that the autonomous experience of cultural life was decided. I'm very convinced, decided by fully sighted people and persons who don't have problems with hearing. So just wonderful designers and curators who are dealing with an aspect where presumably at the end of the line the budget for accessibility was not really there. So they rather invested the voice of Brad Pitt, and that's actually, as far as I'm concerned, the last thing people should invest in an audio guide, which is very difficult to adapt to new situations, if you want to put it that way. So our principle is basically always to keep it flexible. So therefore, we want to just give the architecture with the Busca app, which we at last, here we are, have, as well as with Mindtext. And with Mindtext, I think you can fulfill a lot of needs. And the best is, as already said, it's minimal invasive. It hardly costs anything to deal with it. The apps are free, and especially when it comes to detecting QR or NFC, you don't actually need, for example, Mindtext. Forget Mindtext. Just take any app. I mean, and then you can obtain the information in a barrier-free way, and they will be read out to you. And if you currently we're building a lot on the content management system, which is the major challenge. It's the El Corazon, of our app, basically, because we use it as little canals for every item of information, whether it's text, picture, audio, or at last video. So it'll be displayed always the right way. But the major aspect is that we're not dealing with the content, but we want to give the content so you can, actually what was mentioned earlier, what about kids? Yes, I mean, I'm not just close being blind, but I'm super handicapped because I have 2 children, and I don't speak the same language as my wife, and so therefore it is, there can be also audio guides for kids without actually putting too much effort in, and they exist, and you can actually take them home with your mobile phone and continue your journey and bring cultural life not just as a local-based experience, but make it global. Go and use the social networks and just take as a little box of little tools, build your own brick wall. Well, no, I'm from Berlin. No brick wall, but no airport either. And but just build your little box of information just at the level which you like it to be. And that's basically what we try to do as an attempt to give a little bit more of an accessibility and an autonomous experience of cultural life. Thank you very much.
No, you can stay. You can stay.
Okay.
You just have to pass the computer to Jaime.
I think so.
Bueno, pues mientras.
While Jaime gets ready, I'm going to introduce him. He's part of the company GVAM. Over 10 years ago, he started with the Avanza project, and they developed the first audio guide that included a project that involved all the representatives of people with a disability to create the first museum audio guide that was accessible. They have developed many technologies that are very varied, very inclusive, and they increasingly offer more new features. And on this occasion, he's going to talk to us about the ABSIDE project that they're currently developing, among others. And Mr. Solano is the director of GVAM. He is a PhD in information sciences from the Complutense Madrid University, and he's also a researcher in the Carlos III University in Madrid, and he's published papers as Museums in the Future, Accessibility and Mobile Technologies, and also a very interesting article as Mobile and Accessible ITCs for Museums for a very reputable magazine. Thank you very much to the organizers and to you for being here and for paying a bit of attention to us at this time of the day. Previous presentations talked about the world of mobile apps and what they represent. I am here on behalf of a technological development company that has also realized the importance of content and of people. We started over 7 years ago to develop this type of apps when practically mobiles, tablets, and these devices were not really widespread, but there was a need for convergence and there was an opportunity for accessibility so that we could come up with solutions that would enable us to equalize and to bridge the digital gap that had always existed. As Alicia said, I am, of course, not going to talk about the National Archaeological Museum because my colleague already talked about it. And I'm not going to talk about any other museum, but I would like to talk about the project that we have been developing for 1 year. It's the ABSIDE project developed jointly with Orange Foundation. And our intention is in 3 years' time to include or to transfer the most amount of accessible contents and apps to the most amount of cities in Spain so that we can generate a database of accessible content that can be reutilized in future projects for at least 3-4 years. That's the extent of our project, depending on the agreement. But our philosophy is, of course, to last in time. The main challenge for the ABSIDE project was to include accessibility in a global solution. Sometimes we didn't consider this to be a problem as such, but we were wondering how could we put together an app, a solution that could serve for 100% of visitors, but it wouldn't be insufficient for people with a disability, and at the same time, it shouldn't just be an accessibility solution that only applies to a few people. So the philosophy is for these applications to become the one and only app for these centers. And accessibility is embedded since the onset. It's something that it's essential. There's no distinction. That was our main objective. And we didn't just count with the participation of Orange Foundation. This was something that was innovative. But we also included town halls, museums, and other institutions that manage cultural heritage. And sometimes when they did this on their own, their outlook was a bit restricted. So our main objective was for them to change their position on this project so they wouldn't have this limited approach, so that they could go more general and broader. That was the main action. So how did we go about it? we did have some advantages, but we did something that I think always works, which is to demonstrate how accessibility is beneficial for 100% of the population. To develop a technical accessibility measure benefits everybody and solves an existing problem, which is the lack of technical resources and funding that these centers suffered in order to develop a mobile application that would allow for anyone to visit. So what we did was to sort out that problem, for starters, and then there were other elements that we used, which is the possibility to reuse this app. That was very important, so that the project wouldn't just become a presentation or an event that would include the town mayor or the museum's directors, because we wanted this to last in time. So we wanted contents to be updated, and we wanted to add value to the investment so that it would last longer. That was another element that was key for us, and we were very determined to work on it. Here we have some of the apps that we have already developed for Córdoba's Alcázar, the Museum on Men and Nature in Human Canine Nature in Tenerife, the Museum of Segovia, Human Evolution Museum in Burgos, Carmen Thyssen's Museum in Malaga, Avila's application, the application for the province of Cuenca. And here we have an update of an already existent app, which is the application of the Lázaro Galdiano Museum. This one will be presented next week. The app for the city of Salamanca, for Ibiza, coming in a couple of weeks. Another one for Mérida, or another one for Cáceres. So here we have different agreements that we have signed with many cities that are heritage of humanity in Spain, and 15 cities indeed, and 5 museums that are part of the state network of museums, and also with other museums that have joined up to this macro project that, as I said in the beginning, has as goal to encompass and to lay the foundations for a long-lasting process. I don't know if I will be able to open this link. No, apparently Office is not letting me open this link because it's trying to open in Explorer, and I don't think it'll work on the Explorer browser. But you could visualize this application on a web format, because, well, our technology is multi-platform, but it's quite convenient, I would think, to download the app to your mobile device so that you can do the visit while using the app. This is what it was originally designed for, so that you can use it while you visit. How do we do it? What's the technology that we use? Well, as I said earlier on, we wanted this to be multi-platform, so the technology is HTML5, but it's downloadable. And we wouldn't want it for it to be a problem to have bad access to the internet. Nevertheless, the Wi-Fi is really not widespread at 100% right now. It offers accessibility measures that are integrated. Some of them have with the technology itself and compatibility with audio description programs that some phones already include, such as VoiceOver, and there's some other technical features that are included as additional content, such as sign language videos and audio description scripts. And there are some others that are generated by the app in an automated manner using content, which is, for instance, subtitles and this interface that we have with Tomatrust. And the best part of this is not really for me to be able to tell you about this, but the fact that it can be updated as time goes by. The tool allows us to build the tool and to keep it alive and kicking and accessible and updated for many years. As I said earlier, we need to stress the usefulness of the investment. And in order for this investment to be useful, we had to come up with a system that would update the contents and everything in the app so that it could be useful in time. And now the managers and the curators and the users can update the app without having to pay an additional cost, because cost is sometimes a problem, but we didn't want it to be a burden in this case. If we want to introduce a new language in the future or a new place, a new track in the city, we wanted to be able to introduce it without an additional cost. Well, apart from the effort that it takes to create the tracks, the texts, and so on. And if this can be subtitled and accessible so that you can navigate through the application through audio guides, well, that would be the only effort that we would have to make to update it. We don't have to take down the app and remake it all over again. These are the main results that we have achieved. We have thousands of downloads. It's an app that is intended for everybody. So this is the total volume of visitors that go to the city or museum, etc. We have created a lot of content, and this is an added value. It is very important to look at these figures because it makes us think about future uses, because we are creating an app. At the same time, we're creating content that can be used in TV, for a website, and in many contexts. This can be led by the museum, by the town hall, or by any other institution. And of course, there's a series of matters that have to do with technological capability to implement new projects and new solutions that will allow cities to connect this with their tourism networks or with education boards for school visits and so on. So that's the philosophy behind our project, so that we are not just restrained to this type of visits, cultural visits. We want to be able to use this to pay a day trip to Avila, Segovia, or Toledo, but we want to add further value so that we continue investing on this, and so that accessibility goes throughout the whole evolutionary process. So that was roughly my presentation and what I wanted to tell you about.
Y aquí les dejo también mis datos de coordenadas.
And here you have my contact details in case you want to ask me any questions. Thank you, Enrique. Well, as it has happened in many of the workshops during this Congress, time flies by, and we are all very interested in the projects that are being presented, but we do still have a few minutes in case you want to ask questions to our speakers.
Muy bien. Ahí al fondo hay una, lo que no sé si... Ay,
Hola. Hello. I have rather a comment, because in the Audesk mobile app, I downloaded it in Ecuador. I tried to synchronize it with a film that is Latin Spanish, and it never synchronized. So I tried it very few times, but I didn't manage to do it. I know that you've thought it for Spain, but maybe have you thought about having certain films in other languages? Because I got the app there, but it didn't work. Well, I'm glad that you asked this question, of course. I work on social projects. I guess that the apps are done to be downloaded in Spain. I don't know if I'm wrong or right, but anyways, I've got here a technological backup who's a colleague that works in innovation. So Estíbaliz, maybe you can help me here. I'll thank you if you can help me out here. Hello, good afternoon. Well, what you say is it's of great sense because the app listens to the audio of the film. So what we do is contrast that audio in our database and we synchronize it automatically. So if the audio that is the basis of our description, audio description, is in Spanish of Spain, but if it's heard in a different intonation or with a different accent, it will never synchronize. So yes, you're right. Not only when it's Spanish with a different accent, but even the DVD versions are different sometimes to the versions of the movie theaters. So sometimes we have to have two different audio descriptions. So yes, audio description, yes, has to be very precise so that it can be synchronized. So what you say, it's yes, we have to bear in mind that yes, there are films that have more than one language. It is the same language, but I mean in different versions, if we can say so. More questions from the audience? I'd like to make a general questions to all the speakers, but feel free to answer. Because we are seeing many advances on culture technology, but there are projects aiming at sensory impairment that are integrating more and more. We're reaching to the intellectual impairment level, and we're advancing little by little. But I wanted to ask us four speakers and answer if you feel comfortable. What's the challenges that we're going to be facing? What are the coming needs that we're going to face? And how technological projects that are being developed and implemented, how can they be a solution to these challenges that we're seeing as needs? Anyone can answer, even the four of you. Well, I think it's a thrilling scenario. As Jaime said before, we've started not long ago. If we look back 15 years, well, we can ask ourselves, how could we live without a cell phone? Because now it's the only thing we care about when we leave home is to take the cell phone. So it is a major challenge, a thrilling scenario. We're moving on step by step. Technological accessibility started later, but I think that we're advancing, and little by little, accessibility is just getting at the level of technology. And what's so important is for all the foundations, associations, and companies of the IT sector assume that technology has to be for all at all times. And with that, we will solve many, many, many things. Thank you.
As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't really matter what the sensor is called like, but I think and do believe very strongly that we are technologically wise already far, far beyond what we are currently using. I mean, so what is lacking is the development of proper usage of these sensory devices currently. So what does that mean? We can navigate, but currently it's not the ultimate solution to do a proper door-to-door navigation. Outdoor, you have the GPS. Maybe at some stage with Galileo, we might have a very precise navigation. Maybe even then, in combining sensory devices with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth Low Energy, a little bit of NFC. We should not forget that we are not there for the technology, but the technology is there for us. So the house should build around us, but not we are kind of being slaved. Oh, the washing machine. And whatever, and that should not be the case. Like for example, I'm living in Berlin. My father is living at the French border. He sees his son, his grandson, twice a year. But my son and my father have a better relationship than I with my son. He's 5 years of age, so I'm joking all the time, but I mean, nevertheless. Every evening, my son touches the picture of my father placed next to his bed with my mobile phone, and an NFC starts displaying my father reading a fairy tale, which he records every day whenever he has the time to do that. So it's his good night story. So things like that, I think, well, that's kind of cute. I like that idea. But I like also the idea that once you're older and you cannot read the prescription because you never learned Braille because you're maybe 70 years of age, which is not really old in our times, but you're not really fully sighted anymore. We shouldn't forget that people like their environment where they're currently living, and ambient assisted living is an aspect where sensory devices also play a rather important role. So then it's also good that medicine talks to you. I mean, I wouldn't say, yes, place sensors everywhere and get mad about it. No, it should be really at the right doses. So therefore, I think we should realize the necessities. Associations should open their mouth and say, hey, we have that and the other need. They shouldn't think, I'm a lawyer, so therefore I think now as a computer scientist, and they can do that or they cannot do that. A professor once came up to me 6 years ago and said, like, stop thinking like you try not to pretend you're a computer scientist. You're not. So just try to say what you want. And I said, like, I want to know who's sitting there. I cannot see that person. It's like, I cannot solve that problem, but we can get close. And that's basically what blind people should do. That's basically wherever you tumble and fall, you're like, why did I fall? Check it out, announce the problem, and there are enough people currently out in this world who can solve the problem because the sensors are there.
Okay.
Bueno, pues, thank you, Eric. Bueno, pues sí,
Well, yes, the idea, yes, is what Matt and Eric said. There's enough technology. We've got a fantastic opportunity because I think very little times have we been so close for accessibility and global solutions to mean the same thing. And even from the business standpoint, it is something that concerns or should concern more culture, the business model, but not because of accessibility, but because of the sustainability of the cultural goods and cultural access. But in any case, accessibility, from my stance, should not represent a cost. It must not be a cost. There is technology, and I think that, as Eric was saying, the solution probably will not be the perfect one, but as a friend of mine, a designer, said, the good is the enemy of the best. So in that case, very often, and in our company, we have found solutions that were trying to be the best ones, but in the end, they were not good ones. So I think that in that case, technology and new technologies are teaching us with good designs to do things properly. Well, thank you, Jaime. I think that with this last participation of the speakers, we have concluded what the workshop has been. And I would like to thank the participation of the 4 speakers for sharing their projects with us. And I want to thank you all for coming and staying till the end of the workshop. And I hope that you will enjoy from the rest of the Congress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah. No. Interesting what you're doing. I like that. No, a generalized app. That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, it's difficult sometimes to explain people that it's going to be general. So
yeah, because
to say it's going to be general. Why not?
Yeah, why not? Because I mean, we just launched Busca for iOS.
Yeah.
We did launch it 3.5 weeks ago.
Right.
And it's